Awesome. And we're back. Thank you again for coming out and kind of managing all the excitement here and being still enough to listen to our next speaker, who's going to be Tovi Heilbronn. What a cool name, damn. Tovi Heilbronn is the Director of Digital Product and Experience at Harry Rosen. He, along with some key team members, were faced with the challenge of bringing their luxury in-store experience to digital platforms when the pandemic shut down all 18 of their retail stores. Tonight, he'll be sharing how the Harry Rosen team completely revamped the digital platforms through a series of best-in-class MACH, like the fast speeds of like the planes, I think, or just MACH, I don't know. I'm gonna say MACH. Platforms and an all-hands-on-deck effort. This should be a little fun story. I'm excited for it. So Tovi. Oh, cool. There you are. Of course, you're from Harry Rosen. Look at that outfit. Awesome.
Hey everyone. Thanks for your attention. It's really an honor to share the story of what Harry Rosen went through in the last couple of years. And really, this is a story about what certain technological decisions we made had an impact on the business in terms of business outcomes and the organization holistically. So the story itself, really, it starts in the middle. It starts at the crossroads. And the crossroads that I'm bringing you to is the back half of 2019, when for context, we had already been sitting on a monolithic e-commerce platform for a number of years. So we'll protect the names of the innocent in terms of who it was, but we really had the choice to say, do we want to continue with this current paradigm of going from really resource-intensive upgrade to really resource-intensive upgrade, which nobody was really happy with doing, nor the business nor the tech side of the house. And the kind of context we were operating in, really the e-commerce team, which I sat on at that time, it was called the e-commerce function, we were seen as the laggards in the eyes of the business. We could never deliver what the business wanted. Efforts that we needed from other teams within the organization, it was seen as dilutive to funneling energy towards the in-store sales channel. Similarly, well, I'll just stop the point there. I forgot my point. The teams themselves were not well positioned to handle with the fragile code we were sitting on, and the infrastructure itself was very difficult to scale. So we had some questions to ask ourselves in terms of this fork in the road that we had. And so it really started with these 4 questions. How might we avoid the endless cycle of needing upgrades to deliver value? We'd been through this before. So we've gone through these upgrade projects, as I said. We end up blowing through scope, blowing through project timelines. And so then you end up cutting back on the scale. And then nobody's happy because the promises of that upgrade, you never fully realized on them. And then the business doesn't feel like they got value for the effort invested. How might we invest confidently in digital technologies for the long term? We were always chasing after features, believing that, after we do this next thing, that's when the digital business really starts to unlock. How might we say yes to ideas more than no? So practically what that means is the business would come to the tech side and say, can you do this? And we would have to come back and say, well, no, we can't, or yes, we can, but after we do these library upgrades and these version upgrades, and then when we come back to the business to say, okay, we're ready, the business needs have already moved on, right? How might we digitize what makes us unique? Harry Rosen believes that why a client shops with Harry Rosen is different from why they shop with someone else, another competitor. So let's go back to the beginning now. This is Harry Rosen. So a bit about the brand. Harry Rosen started in 1954 with a 500 square foot store on Parliament Street in Cabbagetown. It started as a made-to-measure business, which means there's no inventory. You are literally, like, imagine Harry, this is him at the opening of the Yorkdale store. This is 1972. It's a very personable, very intimate experience. Your advisor, the person helping you, is literally in your face. And so you get to know them. You establish relationships, long-lasting, meaningful relationships. You talk about all kinds of things. And Harry would take notes about the things that he talked about with his customers, literally on cue cards, and just file them away, so that when the customer would come back for the next visit, he would be able to brush up on his notes and say, did you get that promotion you were after? Did your daughter marry that guy you didn't like? Or, how is your wardrobe working out for you? Stuff like this. And so he built the business one client at a time. He was a CRM before that was a thing. Harry just turned 90 years old. You can still see him walking through the office, and I'll often see him standing at the corner of Bay and Bloor, which is by our central office and the flagship store. And he's just a consummate conversationalist. He just talks to people. He asks them about their fashion. He wants to know about what's going on with retail. Harry didn't know much about advertising. This goes back to 1961, where one of his clients ended up being the creative director of Maclean's magazine. And so they struck up a conversation, as Harry does, saying, well, tell me about advertising. What is this all about? And so this fellow told him all about it, and then they ended up striking up a deal where Harry, who had no advertising presence, there was no brand of Harry Rosen, it was just a store. He said, I'll give you your first ad. In fact, I'll give you your first series of ads for a trade. For every ad that I create, number one, you don't make any changes to it. As anybody who's dealt with creatives know that the creatives don't want their creative messed with by the client. They think it's perfect. And so this fellow said the same. He said, don't change a thing. And number two, for every ad that you run, I get a suit and my art director gets a suit. He said, okay, fine. Sounds like a trade. So this was the very first ad, which ran in the Globe and Mail. And this really was the birth of Harry Rosen, the company, the enterprise, being synonymous with menswear expertise. And so the punchline of this ad, here's some more of them from the original 6, they all ran in the Globe, was all questions that men presumably had about menswear. So how long should your pants be? How long is your jacket sleeve? How do you match a tie with a jacket, etc.? These are still questions that men ask about. And so Harry Rosen became synonymous with always having the answer to menswear questions. Fast forward to today, Harry Rosen is Canada's largest menswear retailer with approximately 40% market share domestically. We've got 19 stores, 5 of them are outlets. We also have an online presence, and last fall we launched a off-price business called Shop Final Cut. We're the first Canadian luxury retailer to have sold online. You can look it up in the Wayback Machine. It wasn't pretty, but we were the first to do it. The average store is 18,000 square feet. This is the Yorkville location, which is 55,000 square feet. And it's now a third-generation family-run business. So Ian Rosen is Harry's grandson. He's president and COO. And so when you go into a store, this is what you see. You see world-famous brands like Brunello Cucinelli, Tom Ford, Zegna, etc. This is a shop-in-shop for Bastille, which is a streetwear brand, and this is one of our footwear collections. So when you walk into a store, it's highly curated collections. We present it as impeccably as we can. And the last point, really the 3 things that make Harry Rosen special, the expertise, the product curation. The last is the client-advisor relationship. So starting from Harry, the DNA was set for the duration of the enterprise. We're now 68 years in. So every client is paired up with an advisor. Not every client shops with an advisor, but those who have one tend to get the most out of the business. So these relationships are deep, they're meaningful. I mean, literally, sometimes they get passed from generation to generation. So just as when I became a working professional, my dad, who was just near retirement, he would say, okay, you now need a posture, you need a stylistic opinion. Go and talk to my guy, Jack Rodriguez at First Canadian Place. He'll set you up, right? So that's common, that's a thing. And yet this was our website in 2019. So none of what I just told you about is really represented here. This represents sameness. This looks like if you remove the logo, it could look like any other .com. And it wasn't for lack of trying. We just didn't have the right tech. We had good people, but couldn't actually execute against what we thought Harry Rosen's ambitions should realize against. The kicker is that, you guys have it here, Pilot espresso beans. I get a Pilot subscription sent to my house for espresso beans, and Pilot uses a Shopify site, and they've got a subscription program. And I thought, these guys are doing a better job at e-commerce than we are. Why is that? Something just didn't seem just. I'm not a jealous person, but still. And so we're back at the crossroads. And the crossroads really here on the one side would be, okay, do we continue with this monolithic paradigm? Do we continue with the everything in a box e-commerce platform? Or do we choose something completely different? And what that completely different option is, It's still in its nascent phase, but headless or composable commerce or MACH, all these names, there's just subtle differences between them, which essentially means reclaiming the glass, reclaiming the presentation layer, and then plugging in whatever SaaS vendors are best in class for what you need them to do. So search, CMS, hosting, OMS, it goes down the line. And so you essentially create a composite, composable commerce. It means to stitch all these things together yourself. And so we chose to do that. So really, December 31st, 2019, I'm just going back one. December 31st, we signed all of our contracts. We thought, okay, we're going to set off on this big voyage. It's going to take us 10 months to replatform. It's going to be the replatform to end all replatforms. It's going to be gravy. And then COVID hit. And from a few slides ago, this, I mean, I didn't pay for the image. You can see the Getty Images word mark. But this is actually the Bloor Street store, the same one I showed you a few slides ago. This is the cladding on the Bloor Street. So the business was shuttered. Over the last 2 years, so 2020 and 2021, the business was closed for about 250 days on average. So really overnight, Harry Rosen turned from a mostly in-store experience to a pureplay.com. So that presents challenges. To make matters worse, the monolithic platform that we were sitting on was crumbling. We were going through Black Friday kinds of traffic volumes every single day. And the site was like, there were memory leaks, sessions were being lost. It was really just awful. So balancing between the two is a little bit challenging. And so with that challenge, under the air cover of COVID, we were given permission to really launch on the new platform as soon as robotically possible. So really, when you talk about things like MVP, minimum viable or minimum valuable product, it really provokes some very interesting conversations when what the .com that you're on, which is the only lifeblood of the business, is crumbling. It makes you take a much harder look at what's actually required. And so we went live, what was supposed to be a 10-month launch, we scaled it back to 5. So we went live in August of 2020, starting in March of 2020. And we ditched all kinds of features that clients valued. For example, BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. Depending on the time of year, that generated 10 to 20% of all digital business. So just to say, like, see you later. We'll come back to that after we launched. That was hard. We dropped wish list, we dropped order history, we dropped PayPal as a payment method, sacrifices all over the place. This is not an architectural diagram, I'm sorry, but this is just a simplified view of what our ecosystem looked like in March of 2020. So there's the .com and then the ERP in the back. We had our old development agency and then also some internal dev resources. And this represents the graduating class, if you will, of what we went live with on the new composable commerce tech stack that we have. And then this is what we have to date. So what I'm trying to press upon you is that with the new technology choices, we're able to build fast. Okay? We're able to extend both the breadth and the depth of the customer experience and business functionality faster than we ever could before. So what's the impact? From going live, we now saw 300% growth in orders, 2020 compared to pre-COVID. 4 nines uptime, effectively, at 300 milliseconds since go live, and 100% improvement in site conversion, so actual sales. In terms of from-to states, what we used to do on the monolith is one production release with about 50 work items once every 6 to 8 weeks. 6 weeks was aggressive, 8 weeks was when we were being a bit more compassionate to ourselves. And each deployment took hours. They were really hard, rollbacks were not uncommon, they were really nail-biting affairs, they sucked, I was there. The 2 state, now we do one production release with about 5 to 10 work items, on average every 3 days. And that's over 2 years already. And each deployment, whether it's front-end or back-end, front-end deployments use a different tool chain than back-end, but regardless, they take seconds, and there's a rollback plan for each. So nobody's worried if something goes wrong, just roll it back. From 2 states in terms of business impact, work items. So this, what I'm showing you here, this is taken from what's called the Flow Framework. It's written by a guy named Mick Kirsten, highly recommended read if you go down that rabbit hole. What you're seeing here is to say every JIRA ticket that you have can be bucketed into one of 4, buckets. And the one here that I'm trying to highlight is features. which is tightly defined as something that either the business or your customers get direct value from. Okay? So beforehand, we were only delivering about 15% of work items as features. Now we're trending much closer to 50. So with that 50%, the business can actually see what they're getting for the investment they make in digital, which encourages them to continually reinvest in digital because they're seeing it, right? It's not something that the tech team does for themselves. From two states, the .com used to be primarily largely sale. It's much easier to sell things when it's driven by price or lack thereof. And now we're selling much more at regular price, which means we have the tech, we have the teams who can actually better express the value that you're getting for the thing that you're choosing to buy, right? We don't have to sell based on price. It used to be mainly lower price point. Now we're seeing a 50% lift on average in average unit price. And we used to see mostly clients who shopped either in store, most of them were in store and some were online, and they were mostly exclusively online. Now we see much more crossover. So for us, there's this holy cohort, which we call omni clients, which are clients who shop across multiple channels. We're seeing a significant growth in that, which is exactly what we want to see. Okay, so that's a bit of the background. I'm going to share with you 3 use cases about what we can do now with the tech that we're on, and then get really close to the end. So first use case, replicating the in-store advisor experience. As I was mentioning before, the client-advisor relationship is something very special. It's part of like the secret sauce of what makes Harry Rosen. But in order to nurture or even meet your guy or woman, you had to go in store. It was a physical store experience. You couldn't really do it online. And so what we chose to do is replicate, we brought to life something that's part of the Harry Rosen lexicon called a laydown. So typically when you go in a store, you've made an appointment, and your guy or your woman, your advisor, has done their homework. They've tried to figure out what it is that you're going to shop for, what your intent is, your occasion. And they'll prepare stuff for you, so you don't actually have to go walking through the store, checking everything out. They just say, hey, how's it going? Let me just show you everything I prepared for you. And usually that takes them to like bottom of the funnel kind of transaction, or interaction rather. So we wanted to replicate that digitally, which meant we took this laydown concept and digitized it. So essentially we're creating like a curated shopping list, which, in this case, Ashley is my advisor, and she sends me a note saying these are the things that you're looking for based on our previous interactions. There's a picture, and if I was to scroll down the page, you'd see like the things that she's picked for me. And she's not only just picked the items, she's also picked the sizes, because she knows me, right? So because there is that trust between the client and the advisor, I don't have to think about, is this right for me? Is it the right size? She's done the work. All I have to do is hit add to cart, checkout, right? The impact of these laydowns, these digitally assisted sales generate about 10% of digital revenue. We see an 2x AOV for these assisted sales relative to unassisted, and they're fully commissioned as well. The last stat that I didn't have up here is, we're in apparel, so returns is a big problem. We see 3x less returns for orders made this way. So it's really important to the business. Customer journey number 2, turning inspiration into shoppable moments. So this is all about taking diverging content with commerce, which are, for an e-com business, usually 2 disparate parts of the journey. So the marketing team has a phrase that they call working dollars, working capital versus fixed. So essentially, they wanted to see that because they're such perfectionists in all the creative they do, the photo shoots and the assets and the articles, all of it, we wanted to see, can we amortize those expenses in different applications, in different contexts? So here's one example I'll walk you through. The company actually issues a print magazine, the actual artifact called Harry Mag. Comes out twice a year, once every season. And it's a huge investment, not in terms of money, but also in terms of the people who power it. But that magazine has a very short shelf life. Or literally, like, if it gets sent to my house, I may leaf through it, I'm inspired, but then I put it on my night table, and then stuff piles up on top of it, and then I've forgotten about it, right? But the assets in there, we could just deconstruct it and say, well, all the things that we've invested in that artifact could be used in different applications. So we wanted to make that investment work harder for us. What you see here, this is one image. It's a model wearing a bunch of stuff from the last spring-summer issue. And this image was part of an editorial page. And all we did is put this button on it, get the look. And if you click that button, you're then shown the exact items that this fellow is wearing, and you can transact with them there. So we're essentially taking people from a content page to say like a mid or lower part of the conversion funnel, right? Another variation on that, here's the same thing, an asset from the Harry magazine that's deployed on an editorial page. You click at the look, oh, that's very nice, his jacket is that much money, I'm price sensitive to that. It may not be the right thing for me, but then if you click shop similar, you can then filter down to something that's more to your price point, to your preferred brands. Again, there's different ways for you to achieve that same look. You don't just have to drop that money. And lastly, we took those images and put QR codes up on our window displays. Some of them are street level, some of them are in malls. So we're trying to capture that moment of inspiration. When people are walking by, they may think, oh, I'm late for my lunch appointment, I gotta go back for a meeting, whatever. They can just snap that QR code and then shop it later, right? The impact of this stuff, 150% increase in page views per session, 300% lift in content page value, and marketing spend is only up 10% relative to 2020. So we're stretching those dollars much further. Last journey, seamless journeys from online to in-store. So this looks familiar, right? Most businesses play that game either because you work for the business or you're the customer. We all do it. I hate them personally, and I argue about this internally all the time. But the catch here is that most of these discounts are only good for online redemption, right? Which is, it works for the business. It doesn't always work for the customer, especially if it's an omni-channel business. So why do we do it? Why do we put our customers through these hoops? So this isn't live yet, but probably in about 2-3 weeks' time, we're going to be having our online discounting engine queried at runtime in the store POS. So as you're running up a transaction, our in-store POS is going to be making API calls into our online discounting engine to say, does a discount apply to this cart, this in-store transaction? So we're essentially federating the systems, so it doesn't really matter where the discounts are orchestrated, but that you can be deployed across any sales channel. So it works for the business users as well. They don't have to replicate it across multiple systems. So what's the point? What's the point of all this? Going MACH or going headless, going composable, for Harry Rosen, this is not meant to be prescriptive, but the effect it's had on our business is it's actually allowed us to come really this close. Like the future feels very bright for us, that we can deploy all of these objects, all these entities, product pricing, discounts, inventory, loyalty, client records, and orders, wherever the customer is. So the friction, we have the right technology in place. We just have to clean it up a little bit in terms of the architecture and procedures, but it becomes much more about there's just the client and there's just the brand. It's not about, oh, you can only do this in person and somebody's got to help you in this other fudged way in store. It's just the customer and the brand. Everything that you want to see from the brand is available wherever you are. So omnichannel is the winning recipe for us, and we feel like we're really close to getting there. My last slide, which I'll share with you guys, in terms of organizational change that the tech decisions have impacted us. Number one, it's enabled business users. So tech used to be kind of behind a curtain, right? You made a request, you kind of like lobbed it over the fence, and you sent your requirements over, and you got something back in some altered state. Now, it's totally opened up where the tech side of the house can say, here's your tooling, here's your instrumentation, here's some things you can do with it. But it gives me no greater pleasure to see that our e-commerce merchandise team is saying, oh, did you know you can create these merchandising rules? No, I didn't know that. Really cool. Did you know you can do this new kind of discount? No, I didn't know that. It wasn't meant to do that, but cool, you figured it out, right? So there's this flywheel effect that's taken off where business users are themselves becoming power users of the tooling. It's not something that just sits behind the gated wall of tech. Building up a product organization. So we used to hire for very specific roles like BA, PM, engineers of different flavors. Now, because our technology allows us to move so much faster, there's this whole empty layer that we're trying to fill in of product managers. And these product managers can sit with the engineering team, with UX, with QA on the one side, and then also sit with the business on the other side and say, what are the problems you are trying to solve for? Let us figure it out, right? So that's not new. I mean, product management has existed for a long time, but for us, organizationally, it's new. And it's allowed digital to sit at the highest seats, at the highest level of the organization, to have meaningful conversations. We're seen as stakeholders in ways that we never were before. And that ties into this third point, focusing on value stream management. Each product manager is given a slice of the customer journey. So for example, one person owns from when a cart starts until a return is finished, right? So that whole journey is seen as something that one person can have a persistent full stack team to support. So they're moving fast. The fourth point here, shared language between business and technology teams. As someone who sits more on the tech side of the house, I don't have to talk to the business about story points and epics and change management and version control and all this stuff that just make their eyes glaze over. I can talk to them in terms that they understand, that express velocity, that express reliability, and express how quickly are we getting value from the investments we make. And the last thing is tighter coordination. The business is much more tied into Jira, the whole Atlassian suite. So Jira software, Jira service management, Jira roadmap. So if loss prevention needs a thing, or if operations needs a thing, we can show them and talk to them about, okay, we can't do it in time. Is there some workaround? So again, just expressing that we're having conversations with the business in much more meaningful ways. So that's really all I can talk to you guys about. That's the whole talk. And I just want to say that this story, in a sense, I feel like I'm just the storyteller. Where if you guys think that we're doing some cool things, please come and join us or come talk to us. I stand on the shoulders of giants here. My boss, Steve Jackson's actually here. So please come and engage with us, except for the Rangle and Dev Cycle people. I shouldn't be poaching them, but anybody else, come and talk to us. So thank you very much for your attention. Oh, yeah, any questions either now or later? Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to ask, so the actual e-commerce site itself, when you see like all the different items, it looks like they're direct photos of the actual item.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen, I mean, it's not like super new tech, but I'm seeing it more in retail and like especially luxury tech as well, where in the, like the actual site, if I want to buy this item, I can see it, for example, like in my living room over there, or specifically for suits, like I can put it on whoever it is or myself, and it kind of shows up on me like in like augmented reality.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything like that in the pipe, in the roadmap to do?
I mean, we're curious about stuff like that. I don't have a really solid answer to say this is exactly what we're doing to solve that problem. But yeah, size fit is a huge issue for us. It's in apparel, plus it's like very high consideration items, right? Like if you're spending like $1,300 on sale for that blue bomber, you want to know it's going to fit you, right?
Right.
So it's a big problem. I don't have a solid answer for you, but we continually work to try to figure that one out. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you for the presentation. It was great, and it sounds like the journey was great as well. It was in that moment when you switched from the in the box thinking to out of the box, like composability and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, did you have something like a strategy of how to get from the point A to point B, how to replace all those solutions developed in-house to those provided by vendors? How did you measure vendors? How did you onboard them? How did you calculate ROIs, or like another strategy?
It's a multi-part question. You may have to keep me on track because I can probably only remember the first part. But the strategy for doing it, we chose to do essentially the e-com platform we were on. We tried at first in about mid-2019. The very first SaaS vendor we signed that was part of that graduating class was Algolia, our search engine. And because the search capability, product search specifically, the search capabilities on the old .com were really so lacking, we thought, okay, maybe there's a way for our old .com, the monolith, to call into the new search engine, so that could be the first way we roll it in. So essentially do like a slow strangle approach instead of a big bang. What we ended up doing was a big bang approach. It's like just drop everything of the old and bring everything live, right? Not recommended. Like if you have the luxury of time, MACH, like going headless, allows you to not do that, which is also being more compassionate to your team. We couldn't do it. It was really just too difficult. It was too prohibitive to integrate that new search engine into the old tech stack. And so that was a signal, okay, like let's just not try. Let's just build the whole thing behind a curtain. And when we're ready, we'll just bring everything live, right?
Just total replacement.
Exactly. So a big bang.
Version 2.0.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah. Which in a sense, like there's things you can do that are advantageous. Like you can bring certain systems live into production. Like if we're using a new gateway, we can run production transactions essentially behind a curtain, right? So it takes a lot of the guesswork. It allows you to do like a staged launch in a sense. But yeah, there is more risk.
Can't say look at happy roll that out.
Just teed you up right there. Any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
I don't know if you did a good job in terms of like not mentioning exactly how things are, or I didn't get that. So I know like you can build things with different APIs and things like that. Can you go a little bit deeper into like how things being hosted in the cloud,
Sure.
and then in terms of like APIs and things like that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Happy to get into that. It's hard to cater a presentation like this that was like, satisfying both business or like marketing and tech sides of the house. So the .com itself is a Next.js, custom front end. It's hosted on Vercel. Vercel. Then I'm thinking in my mind's eye, there's the architectural diagram. So I'm going essentially from like the top down. Okay. So there's like the Next.js custom front end. That makes calls to various other applications that service the website storefronts, like the commerce engine, CMS, what else would be there? The search engine and the authentication service. Those are like the four main ones. We do have like auxiliary services like dynamic yield for A/B testing, right? Like personalization, stuff like that. And then going behind that, we've got like say the payment gateway on the one side, and then all the payment services that we have that kind of sit over there. And then there's a Kafka event stream layer that sits between, it's like the intermediary between those front-end applications, like the CMS, the commerce engine, search, and client authentication. And that essentially passes data from the ERP, like the true back office, up to the web. And within Kafka, we have a MongoDB instance as well. So there's certain like processing.
You guys are hosting this in-house?
No, it's all in the cloud. Yeah.
And do you guys like using any containers?
Containers? Yeah, we've got a Kubernetes instance, which sits in the IBM cloud, which is where we're running all that stuff, like all that processing between the back office and the front end.
So I guess I can see how that's a big tech to all of that.
Yeah, go for it.
Quick question for you. When you mentioned earlier in your presentation that you had some own timelines and estimates around your previous monolith, around fixes and whatnot. When you proposed MACH to the business, how were there some tough conversations you had to have around, yeah, we'll get this done in 10 months? How did you approach those tough conversations, and what kind of pushback did you have from the business around throwing out, your previous architecture, rebuilding it, essentially?
That's a very good question. I mean, getting executive buy-in is like a whole other conversation. I mean, you can talk to Steve about that because like he was part of those conversations that I wasn't always a part of. But in total, I mean, I have to be careful about my words because it's easier. But I think part of what made it easier was the fact that our old .com just sucked so much. Like really, like nobody was happy with it, the business or the tech side. And so really it was a function of like, really guys, like you want to ask for how much money to do another upgrade? Like haven't we been through this before? Right? So like in a sense that gives you the opening to propose perhaps there's a completely different way, right? I know that how the business thought of spending that money was another in. So in terms of thinking of it between capital versus operating expenses. So for example, just as Harry Rosen would open up a different physical store, they would talk about CapEx versus OpEx. We could have that kind of conversation and say, well, this is a new store as well. So all that money, don't think of it as OpEx for the in-store business. Think of it as CapEx versus OpEx for the online business. So that I think was also a bit of an unlock. There's a few nuances. And also it's just like, how do you talk to the executive? Like something I've learned is like, ask them what they need answered, right? Instead of just trying to say like, this is the way. So hope that helps.
Thank you.
So out of curiosity, like, how did you guys end up like going for all this
Sorry?
How did you guys like end up like decide one of this to mock architecture? But was there any other options, like other design options that you guys considered as well?
We did. Like the procurement process, also I should protect the names of the innocent. We did do a formal RFP with some of the like monolith, and there were also some like hybrid solutions we looked at. But honestly, a lot of it started from conviction, like gut instinct. Like I can distinctly recall, it was actually Ian who shared with me an article. It was like, I don't know, it was like maybe September of 2019. And he just sent me this link. I actually tried to find it in my browser history, but I can't. I'd know it if I saw it. Anyways, it was a link, and it basically explained what composable commerce is, and it had like diagrams. I remember like messaging him back, being like, "How soon can we meet?" Right? Because like there was just something that clicked. It was like, "Oh my God! Like I never knew this actually existed. There's something here, right?" And then we just had to do a lot of validation. But really, for me, anyhow, that was the starting moment of like, there is another way. So hopefully that answered your question. Yeah.
So given the speed that the tech team is moving in, the business side obviously would be a layer to it. So my question would be issues of like supply chain capacity, for example, right? Like, can you fulfill that kind of demand that suddenly goes on a website? So what kind of issues did you have where your tech team was moving too fast, and how did you sort of deal with the business side of it?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't have to trouble myself too much. As in, like, I'm not accountable for supply chain issues. No, it's a real business problem, but it's not really like where I sit in the org chart. In terms of the tech team outstripping the business side, I mean, I don't want to lie. It's not like the tech team is just like, you know, clocking in, like, okay, am I going to have a ticket that shows up in the queue? It's not quite that. But yeah, there are moments where the tech team can go to the e-com team and say, hey, we were just mucking around. There is this new discount type. Do you have a need to use it? And then they have to go to the merchandise planning team and store ops and say, can we actually do this? So like Perfect Partner promos is like an example. Like buy one of these and another of those, get this next thing at a fixed price, right? Just one random example. So it is very nice that like the tech side, if we focus on our instrumentation, if we really learn that really, really well, we can actually drive the business in a sense. Not that we're doing it every day, but it's interesting that we can do that some of the time, right? So what do we do? I don't know. It's just a function of partnership, like partnership with your internal stakeholders. I think they're not used to that kind of conversation. They're used to like them being the ones to give the requirements. So I'm grateful for that we're moving fast and that we are learning our instrumentation, that again gives us the sense of being an even keel stakeholder with them, with the business. Yeah.
What are some new challenges you're facing with the new tech stack?
With the new tech stack? Resources, yeah. Yeah, actually getting people to like do the thing. It's true.
How about money-wise? Is it more financially conservative than your old tech stack? Is it cheaper?
If you do full cost accounting, it's cheaper because we're getting more out of it. It's expensive up front, but once you make the leap, it's better. Lots of questions, yes.
So I come from like a deep learning performance background, and when I immediately heard of the first and second case studies, I thought recommendation models, right? Is that something that I guess in Harry Rosen right now uses,
Yeah.
implementation thing to do it works?
So the one vendor that we have that stuck around is Site, S-Y-T-E. They were mentioned on that one slide, but they power the product recommendations on the .com. We're deploying them in our internal clienteling application, so that say if I'm looking up, say if I'm the advisor and I'm looking up your client record, I could actually have sites recommend to me things that you would be interested in that I can use as the basis for our next interaction.
And is there any feedback for the current, say, advisors? Say in the example, I think it was Ashley gave
Yeah.
10 items to you.
Yeah.
Is there kind of a distilling process of Ashley actually picks from 100 that this recommendation system gave, and then is there a feedback loop at all?
Not yet. We did have an original product recommendation engine that serviced just the advisors, like that internal clienteling app, and had literally like a thumbs up, thumbs down button on every product tile within the carousel that was serviced to them, the advisor. There wasn't much uptake, surprisingly. So again, like this is where, in terms of like good stewards of our tech and good stewards of like product management, as in like that's the view I would try to bring to internal conversations. The tech was cool, but if business users aren't using it, you got to move on to something else. Otherwise, like I'm very sensitive about experience blows, right? Like we don't just like keep things around. If it's not working, if it's not hitting its success metrics, we'll remove it and move on to something else. Yeah.
You described the dynamic where the business or the executive would, beforehand they would say, "Oh, can you do this thing for us?" And you would have to say no or no but. And then at the end you described, and just now you're describing an environment where you can say yes and also this cool stuff. How has that changed the influence that the tech or digital teams have on the direction of the company as a whole strategically? And secondly, what does Harry think about all this?
Harry has no clue. Sorry, your first question. How does it change the direction of the company?
You have all this success from using Mac and doing this whole stuff.
Yeah.
Has it changed the influence of the tech and digital teams on the strategy of the company going forward?
I mean, I'd like to think so, but I say that in humility, as in like I wish the people from like the business side of the house were here and we could just ask them. So I don't know. I think it's moving in that direction, but I'm not the right person to answer that really. Or come and find out. Yeah.
So just adding on to his question, like in the product organization that you're trying to build, like how do you, like now that you validated the brick and mortar model, like even like through the pandemic, the stores are working well, the website's working well, like how do you keep adding more features to your roadmap other than the bugs that you're getting? Like how do you like keep ideating and like adding more features?
I mean, number one, I look outside of our organization for inspiration, but more importantly, I think the answer, my belief is that the answer for what we should be developing, again, if it was just done in isolation, not by talking to the business, but you really need to, I see it as my responsibility to be closely attuned to what the customers and the advisors need, because both of those are really my customers, like the person actually buying the thing and the person selling the thing. And with those two, I think that there's like, just follow the breadcrumbs, right? It may not always have the answer for you, but I believe that that's the direction that I should be looking at to know what we should be doing. And sorry, if I can just come back to your question for a second. One example actually is deploying all this mock infrastructure into the in-store experience, where there's just like a lot of opportunity for us to do that. And so that's where I think that right now we're having some very interesting conversations and spinning up a new dedicated product team, like a value stream team, to figure out that problem specifically. So how we could make the in-store experience more digitally enriched, and using those investments we made that were originally for the .com, but deploying them in the in-store experience, like call it connected stores or omnichannel, whatever, but like actually using that stuff over there, over here, right? So with that, say our operations team, which stores really roll up to in terms of organizational design, they don't necessarily know all the problems or all the answers, so we can come in do user interviews, synthesize all that, and say like, we think the next best step is doing this, and then after that we're going to do that. So creating the almost like a 2-track system of like design, like product design, and then product execution. But we have the ability to come in because they're not used to working with us, and so we have the ability to, I don't want to say dictate more, but we're able to propose things to them and then just try them out. Like for example, like the product recommendation in that clienteling app. We thought it was cool because they said they wanted it, nobody used it, okay, we'll move on, but now we're on to other ideas. Right? I hope that helps. I'm keeping you guys from beer.
So you kind of described this new process as an amalgamation of best-in-class services that you can use now to create your overarching solution, which is great. It sounds really cool. It's awesome. I like it. But I wonder what sort of experiences you might have if you, let's say, hypothetically want to move from Vercel to Netlify. There might be different, contracts that you have to kind of readjust for, or constraints that maybe you don't consider. Like, I know that they have different protocols and different limitations around their cloud functions. How do you mitigate and manage sort of all the knowledge you need to have in your head when you're moving from one vendor to another and make that a smooth process? Have you had to deal with that so far, or are you so far just happy with your first choices?
That's a good question, and what I'll tell you guys is like, even in my observations, like this whole MACH, this whole headless composable thing, it's kind of nascent, I guess, but in all the conversations that I have with other practitioners or vendors in this space, everybody talks about, oh yeah, like because it's composable, you can just like pull something out and pull something else in. But I haven't actually seen anybody do that yet. Everybody's still in the build phase. They're assembling their very first architecture, holistically, of MACH stuff, right? But I haven't actually seen anybody pull something out yet. We've started moving stuff around, like this clienteling app that I referred to. It's hosted on one cloud provider, and we have very good reason to move it out of there and into Vercel, actually. And so we're going through this ourselves, so I don't have a really good answer.
But you might in a month.
Probably like, I'd like to say before like mid-November, but yeah, like we're actively working on that. And it's complicated because there's like a Kubernetes cluster over there, there's authentication issues that have to do with Azure. It's complicated. So I don't know yet, but yeah, we're figuring it out. And also in terms of like knowledge transfer, that clienteling application was built 2 years ago, and the people who built it are no longer on our account. So there's a bit of, just figuring out as you go also. So just being honest.
I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Describe a really exciting process of your organization transforming into like a digital first company in a very short amount of time. And I imagine that would change the culture amongst your employees.
Yeah.
So as an organization, what are some things you have to do to like enable that change and like manage the change in culture within your organization?
That's a really good question. Bring people along and bring them along early. This can't be seen, sorry, I don't want to be prescriptive. I don't believe that being successful with this change management aspect means that you can just drop something off on people's shoulders and say, here's how you do your job, forget about everything you used to do, right? Like that's not going to work, you're going to get resistance that way. Like you have to sell people on the vision about where you're going and why it's going to be a happier, greener pasture and all that. But it takes time to like work on that language and work on the right people so that you get advocates and you create that synergy through the organization. But I think a lot of it has to do with stakeholder. It's just talking to your people so that they feel like they're being brought along and they're buying into where you're going. I mean, we have smart people. We always have, thankfully. Like, we've punched above our weight, we like to say. Isn't like we have like undersized teams that deliver oversized outcomes, but if they're not bought into it, you're going to get resistance. So it's a people issue. Yeah.
Just wanted to ask about when you're talking about transitioning to building the first e-commerce site. Just wanted to ask about testing and how did that kind of come about, or was it kind of something you deliberately thought about including in the first iteration of the site, or did it come on later? And I'm kind of asking as someone who works somewhere where testing is extremely underutilized, and it's always a
feel like we're always kind of behind in terms of how early we bring in our QAs or do UAT or write our test plans. For this Go Live exercise, we did have a QA embedded within the development team. So we tried as best as we could to stay on top of things. So as code was checked in, test scripts were written and executed. It could just be run automatically, you know, in perpetuity. Right? So I think that we always struggle. Like it's almost like a pendulum. I feel that there are times when we're really on top of it, and then there's times where we're behind it, and then we're like, oh wait, we got too far behind. But we're doing more and more automated testing, which obviously that's like the promised land. But there's always better, more work to do in that respect. Anyone else?
I think everyone who's asked you a question.
I know. Thank you very much, guys.